a YouTube search for a multi-strike secondary waveform analysis, you're going to end up with very few results. So today we're going to capture one and analyze it. And this Fusion 2.5 liter 4-cylinder at higher RPMs goes into a single strike strategy, and we're going to capture one of those and analyze it for comparison. In the process, I want to showcase my DIY COP Pro and show you how efficient it is at capturing a secondary waveform. I also want to showcase the single capture mode in H-scope, something I haven't done in my previous videos. I want to demonstrate how quick and how solid that feature is within that app. In the custom probe page of H-scope, you'll notice that I've used -3000 as a multiplier for this probe. The 3000 comes from experimentation, and the minus sign before it serves to invert the waveform. In its raw capture, the waveform is upside down and therefore needs to be inverted. I'm hoping that this custom probe will become one of the presets. We'll ask Martin really nice. So what I want to start off with is a quick probe of all 4 coils. I've selected the COP probe from the drop-down menu. I've placed H-scope in manual trigger. I'm going to raise the trigger to about 10,000 volts. And we'll go start the engine. So we'll start with coil number 1. That's pretty good. Coil number 2. Also pretty good. Coil number 3. Pretty good. And coil number 4. Also pretty good. See how quick and easy H-scope gathers that? So now the plan is to capture the very best multi-strike secondary waveform we can for analysis. I'll be placing the probe squarely on top of coil number 4. H-scope is in single capture mode, and I'll be pressing scope to start the capture, and watch how quickly H-scope responds to that. That was it. See how quick that was? Here, have a closer look. Picture perfect. Let's go analyze that. So this illustrates why the waveform had to be inverted. The secondary behaves inversely to the primary. So at the very beginning here, where you see the secondary being pulled down, that's actually the primary being charged until the collapse in the primary, and then you see the inverse happen where the secondary will spike to the very first firing. It reached, according to this scale, 14,000 volts. That is really an approximation, and it came about by that 3,000 multiplier. Then the spark is followed by a bit of a burn time until the primary coil is being charged again, followed by a collapse of that primary and our second spark, followed by another charge of the coil and a third and final spark, and finally the oscillation of the coil. The period from the start here, where the primary was first being charged, until the initial spark is called the dwell time, and it lasted roughly 1.5 milliseconds here. Whereas from the period from that first spark until the oscillation takes place, that's your actually burn time, and that lasted about 4 milliseconds. In total, the whole event is about 5.5 milliseconds long. You had 3 times that the coil was charged, you had 3 sparks in there, and the whole thing lasts 4.5 milliseconds, and it's captured by this technology. I mean, you have to really appreciate that. So now we're going to try to capture the best single strike secondary waveform that we can for analysis. The engine has to be revved up, say 2000 RPM or so, for it to come out of the multi-strike strategy. I'll ask my personal assistant to help me out with that. We'll have the 8 scope again in the single capture mode for this, and I'll be holding the probe in the very same fashion as I did on the previous capture. Rev it to 2000. Was that quick? So take a look at this nice single strike waveform. Very nice. So let's go and analyze it. This waveform would be more familiar to everyone. It's better covered on the internet. It starts off with the primary being charged again, pulling down the secondary until the collapse of the primary, which produces the induction and our spark line right here. It reached roughly 13,000 volts here, followed by what is known as the burn time. That whole thing here lasted about half a millisecond. And then the coil oscillation as everything tapers off. From start to finish, this whole thing, this whole event lasted 2 milliseconds and was captured in this great detail. Again, just blows your mind. You'll have to excuse the wind out there, it's pretty nasty today. There's more to this secondary ignition work than just theory. There's a practical side to it. My F-150, purchased new in 2002, would chew up the coils as if it was candy in the first couple of years of ownership. Pretty much every one of the coils was changed, and some of them were changed more than once. It took years before I understood why, what was going on. In that model year, they had a faulty DPFE sensor known to Ford. That sensor gets its input from a small tube that's hooked up on the exhaust manifold, and it's prone to moisture. And the sensor would fill up with water, and at freezing temperatures would stop to function. And Ford knew about it, and the solution they came up with was to overwrite the firmware and to prevent the sensor from triggering a trouble code. Like, nice, real nice. So what the purpose of that sensor is to give the input to the ECM as to when to open the EGR valve and allow exhaust gases into the combustion chamber. And if you allow exhaust gases when the engine isn't ready, you create a lean condition, like a really bad one. Secondary ignition relies in part of the ionization of the air-fuel mixture near the spark plug tip. And as the air-fuel mixture, if it's properly mixed, ionizes, it reduces the resistance in the spark plug, and that's the point of least resistance for the secondary charge to spark. with the lean condition created by this malfunctioning DPFE, which was sending exhaust gases in the combustion chamber, that ionization wasn't taking place, the resistance was increased, and the secondary will find the easiest path. And at some point it will turn out to be within itself, and it will probably do a carbon trace right to the primary. And without the benefit of understanding the secondary, I also would have never understood how come those coils were failing. So I think this is a good place to end it. You guys take care.